I've spent most of my adult life on the road. Business trips, client meetings, and endless stretches of highway have become routine. Motels aren't anything new to me. I've stayed in all kinds, from the cheap, run-down ones with flickering neon signs to the fancy ones with free breakfast and spotless sheets. But this one was different. I still don't know how I ended up there. It was supposed to be a straightforward drive 5 hours from one city to the next, stopping only for gas and coffee. But at some point, I must have missed a turn. The highway stretched endlessly, flanked by nothing but trees and darkness. My GPS lost signal about an hour ago, and my phone battery was nearly dead. I wasn't worried at first. I'd been in situations like this before. Just keep driving until you hit a town, a gas station, anything. But as the minutes ticked by, an unsettling thought crept into my head. How long have I been driving? The road ahead looked the same as it had 20 minutes ago. No landmarks, no road signs, not even another car. Just an empty 2-lane road cutting through the trees. My eyelids felt heavy, my hands stiff from gripping the wheel for so long. I needed a break. That's when I saw it. A motel. It sat just off the road, a faded sign barely illuminated by a single flickering bulb. Pinewood Motel. The parking lot was mostly empty, except for a few scattered cars, all looking old and dusty, as if they hadn't moved in years. Normally, I would have kept driving, but exhaustion won. I pulled into the lot, parked near the front office, and sat there for a moment, debating whether I should stay. Something about the place felt off. It wasn't just the way it looked. Plenty of motels looked like this. It was something deeper, something I couldn't put my finger on. But my body ached from the drive, and I knew pushing forward in my current state wasn't safe. Just one night, I told myself. Then I'll be back on the road by morning. The front office was small and dimly lit, the air thick with the smell of old carpet and stale coffee. A single desk sat at the center of the room, a bell on top for service. I tapped it lightly. Nothing. I waited, glancing around. There were no decorations, no vending machines, no magazines, just a single wooden chair pushed up against the wall. Then, from the back room, a man appeared. He was middle-aged, dressed in an old flannel shirt, and had the kind of face that made you forget it the moment you looked away. His eyes, however, were unsettling, not unkind. Just blank, like he was somewhere else entirely. "Need a room?" he asked. His voice was flat, tired. "Yeah, just for the night." He reached under the desk and pulled out an old-fashioned ledger. No computer, no check-in system, just a book with yellowed pages. "Name?" I hesitated. James." I don't know why I lied. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was instinct. Either way, I wasn't about to write my real name in that book. He nodded, scribbled something down, and slid a key across the desk. "Room 109, he said. "Last one down the hall." I took the key, thanked him, and turned to leave. But before I reached the door, he spoke again. "There's a rule here," he said. "Keep the curtains closed." I paused. "What?" He didn't repeat himself, just stared at me like he was waiting for me to leave. I nodded slowly and stepped out into the cold night air. The hallway smelled of dust and old wood. The carpet was faded, worn down in the middle from years of footsteps. I walked past the other doors, noting how eerily silent the place was. When I reached room 109, I inserted the key and pushed the door open. The room was exactly what you'd expect from a roadside motel, simple, outdated, and vaguely depressing. A bed with stiff white sheets, a small wooden dresser, a tiny television sitting on top. The bathroom door was slightly ajar, revealing a dimly lit space with a rust-stained sink. I sighed, tossing my bag onto the bed. The mattress creaked under its weight. Then, something caught my eye. The window. The curtains were open. It wasn't much, just a slight gap, barely enough to notice. But it bothered me. Maybe it was because of what the owner had said, keep the curtains closed. I walked over and pulled them shut. For some reason, I felt a little better. I kicked off my shoes, sat on the edge of the bed, and turned on the television. Static. I flipped through the channels, but every single one was just white noise. I frowned. Weird. I turned it off and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. I just needed sleep. Just a few hours, and I'd be gone. Then came the tapping. It was soft at first. Light, rhythmic taps against the window. I sat up listening. Tap, tap, tap. I turned my head slowly, my stomach twisting. The curtains were still shut, but the sound was coming from the other side. Tap, tap. I swallowed hard. It had to be a tree branch, right? Maybe the wind? I took a deep breath, trying to ignore it. But then I heard something else. Footsteps. Not from the window, but from outside my door. Slow, deliberate, stopping just outside. I held my breath. Silence. Then, from the other side of the door, a long, slow exhale. I reached for my phone instinctively, but the battery was dead. The footsteps moved away, fading down the hall. I sat there for a long time, staring at the door, every nerve in my body on edge. Eventually, exhaustion won. I laid back down, keeping one eye on the window. Sleep didn't come easy, and when it didn't last long, because at exactly 3:07 a.m., the tapping started again. And this time, it didn't stop. The tapping didn't stop. Soft, rhythmic, coming from the window. Tap, tap, tap. I lay there, frozen, staring at the ceiling. My body refused to move, like it knew something I didn't. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. It's just a branch, I told myself. Just the wind. But there was no wind. And there were no trees outside my window. Tap, tap. Slowly, I turned my head. The curtains were still closed, but I could see the fabric moving slightly, like someone was brushing against it from the outside. My stomach twisted. Nope, not dealing with this. I sat up and reached for the lamp. The moment my fingers touched the switch, the tapping stopped. Silence. For a long moment, I just sat there, listening. Then, from outside, footsteps. Slow, heavy, moving away from my window. I didn't breathe, didn't move. The footsteps continued, fading down the length of the motel. Then, nothing. I exhaled shakily. What the hell was that? I reached for my phone, but it was still dead. My charger was in the car, but there was no way in hell I was going outside. Instead, I turned on the television. At first, it was just static. Then, a grainy black and white image flickered onto the screen. I frowned. It looked like a security camera feed. A long, empty motel hallway. A hallway that looked exactly like mine. My stomach clenched as I stared at the screen, waiting for something to happen. And then, something moved. At the far end of the hallway, just barely visible in the flickering footage, a figure, tall, still, facing my direction. I leaned in closer, my pulse hammering. The figure didn't move, it just stood there. The screen flickered, the feed cut to static. Then, a new feed appeared. This time, it wasn't the hallway. It was a door. My door. I recognized the peeling numbers, the worn carpet just outside. I sucked in a breath. The camera was pointed directly at my room. The image flickered. And then, the figure was there, standing outside my door. I lunged for the remote, hitting the power button. The television went black. The room was silent again, except for my breathing. I sat there, gripping the remote so hard my knuckles ached. What the hell is happening? Then, a knock at the door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I went completely still. It wasn't the soft tapping from before. It was knocking. Someone or something was standing right outside my door. I waited, heart pounding. Another knock. Then, the doorknob turned. I shot up from the bed, stumbling backward. The lock held, but the knob rattled, twisting left and right, like someone was trying to open it. My breath came in short, panicked bursts. The rattling stopped. Silence. Then, a slow, heavy exhale. Right outside the door. I slapped a hand over my mouth, my entire body trembling. Seconds stretched into minutes. Finally, the footsteps retreated. I stood there, barely breathing, until I was sure whoever it was had left. I had to get out of here. I grabbed my keys, yanked on my shoes, and bolted for the door, then stopped. A feeling crept over me, an instinct I couldn't shake. Don't open the door. My hand hovered over the lock. I glanced at the window. The curtains were still closed. I swallowed hard, backing away from the door. I needed to talk to the motel owner. I needed answers. I needed to know who or what was outside my room. Taking a deep breath, I stepped toward the door, unlocked it, and cracked it open just an inch. The hallway was empty, but something was wrong. The motel felt different. The air was heavy. The light seemed dimmer, almost flickering. The silence wasn't normal, it was too quiet, like the building itself was holding its breath. I stepped out, moving quickly toward the front desk. I didn't hear a single sound from the other rooms. No television murmurs, no snoring guests. It was like I was the only person here. When I reached the front desk, I rang the service bell. No answer. I rang it again. Still nothing. I leaned over the desk, trying to see into the back room. "Hello?" I called out. "Anyone here?" Nothing. Then, just as I was about to turn around, a voice. Low. Hoarse. "You should leave." I jumped, spinning toward the sound. The motel owner stood in the doorway behind the desk. His face was shadowed, but his eyes were sharp, locked onto mine. "What?" I asked, my voice unsteady. He took a slow step forward. "You shouldn't have opened the door," he said. My stomach dropped. "What the hell is going on here?" I demanded. Someone was outside my room. Someone tried to open my door. The owner didn't react. Instead, he reached under the counter and pulled out a piece of paper. He slid it across the desk. I hesitated before picking it up. It was a list of rules. 1. Keep the curtains closed. 2. Don't answer the door after midnight. 3. If the television turns to static, turn it off immediately. 4. If you hear tapping, do not investigate. 5. If you see someone who looks like you, leave immediately. I stared at the list, my skin crawling. "This isn't a joke," the owner said quietly. I looked up at him. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" He sighed. "Because most people don't stay long enough for it to matter." I swallowed hard. I had one question left. What happens if I break the rules? The owner's expression darkened. "You don't wake up the same." A cold chill ran down my spine. I took a step back. I needed to get out of here. Now. I turned and started walking away. And that's when I saw it. At the end of the hallway, a figure. Tall. Still. Facing me. And this time, it looked exactly like me. I couldn't move. My body locked up as I stared down the hallway at the figure standing at the far end. It wasn't just someone standing there. It was me. Same height, same build, same clothes. Even from this distance, I could tell it had my face. My breath came fast and shallow. My legs felt like they weren't connected to the rest of me. The motel owner's words echoed in my head. "If you see someone who looks like you, leave immediately." The air around me felt thick, like the walls were pressing in. My ears rang. I took a step back. The figure took a step forward. I froze. Then another step. And another. It moved exactly like me. Same pace. Same posture. I turned to the motel owner, my voice hoarse. "What? What the hell is that?" His expression was grim. "You need to go. Now." The air was buzzing, charged like the moment before a lightning strike. I took another step back. So did the thing. It wasn't rushing me. It wasn't running. It was matching me. I reached for my keys in my pocket, my fingers shaking. My car was outside. If I could get to it, I could be gone in seconds. I turned. The hallway lights flickered, and in that brief moment of darkness, the figure disappeared. My stomach clenched. I spun back around, scanning the hall. Nothing. The hallway was empty. A horrible thought crawled into my mind. Where did it go? I looked to the motel owner, where, before I could finish, a whisper of movement came from behind me. The motel owner's eyes widened. "Don't." I turned around. It was right there, standing inches from me. I barely had time to react. Its head tilted, studying me with my own eyes. The skin was too smooth, like a wax figure. The mouth twitched, like it was trying to figure out how to smile. It didn't blink. I stumbled back, heart hammering. It mirrored me. Every movement, every breath, like a reflection without glass. I bolted. Didn't think. Didn't look back. I ran straight for the exit. The motel door wouldn't budge. I yanked the handle. Locked. Spun around. It was still standing there, watching me. The motel owner's voice was sharp. "Get away from it!" I backed against the door, panting. "What does it want?" He grabbed something from behind the desk, a small, rusted bell. "It's not real," he said, stepping toward me. "It's just a copy. A shadow. It wants to take your place." My mouth went dry. The thing in front of me smiled. It was wrong. The expression didn't fit my face. The lips stretched too far. The teeth were too perfect. Then, it spoke. "Let me in." It sounded just like me. I clenched my jaw, shaking my head. The motel owner rang the bell. The sound was sharp, cutting through the air like a blade. The thing twitched. Its face flickered just for a second, like a bad signal on an old television. Then, just like that, it was gone. The hallway was empty again. I pressed a hand against my chest, trying to steady my breathing. My body was trembling. The motel owner lowered the bell. "You need to leave." I nodded. "Yeah, I'm gone." He tossed me something, a key. I caught it, frowning. "That'll get you out," he said. I didn't question it. I just shoved it into the motel door's lock, turned it, and the door opened. I stumbled outside. The night air was cold. I fumbled for my car keys, still in my pocket, rushed to my car, barely pausing to breathe. I yanked open the door, jumped inside, and locked it. My hands shook as I jammed the key into the ignition. The engine sputtered, then roared to life. I slammed it into reverse, tires screeching against the pavement. Didn't check the mirrors. Didn't care. I just drove. Away from the motel. Away from whatever the hell that thing was. I didn't stop. Not until I was miles away. Only then did I finally glance in the rearview mirror. The motel was gone. Not just far behind me. Gone, like it had never been there at all. I didn't slow down. The road stretched ahead of me, a dark ribbon cutting through empty land. My fingers clenched the steering wheel so tight they ached. My foot stayed heavy on the gas. I had no idea where I was going. I just needed to get away. The motel was gone, vanished like it had never existed. That should have made me feel safer. It didn't. Something wasn't right. The highway was too empty. No cars, no headlights in the distance, no street signs or exits, just endless asphalt and the dark silhouette of trees pressing in on both sides. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breath. I needed to call someone. I fumbled for my phone in the cup holder. The screen lit up, no signal. Of course. I cursed under my breath and shoved it back down. My eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, scanning the road behind me. Still empty, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I drove for another 10 minutes, maybe 15. It was hard to tell, my hands were clammy, my pulse hammering in my ears. Then I saw it. Up ahead, just off the road. A motel. My stomach dropped. Number no. It couldn't be. But there it was. Same neon sign. Same flickering vacancy light. Same cracked parking lot. I slammed on the brakes. My car skidded to a stop. This was impossible. I had driven away. Miles away. And yet, the motel was right there. Waiting. I gripped the steering wheel, my breathing shallow. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. My brain scrambled for an explanation. Maybe I had gotten turned around. Maybe I had looped back without realizing, but no, that wasn't possible. I hadn't made a single turn. The road had been straight, unbroken, and now I was right back where I started. A sharp knock on my window made me jump. I whipped my head around. The motel owner stood outside my car. I locked the doors on instinct. My heart pounded. He didn't look angry or surprised, just tired. He leaned down, his voice muffled through the glass. "You need to come inside." I shook my head. No way in hell. But then he said something that made my blood run cold. "If you don't, it's going to find you." I swallowed hard. "What?" He motioned for me to roll down the window. I hesitated, then cracked it just an inch. "It knows you saw it." The words hit me like ice water. The thing in the hallway, the copy of me. I thought I had escaped it. I thought it was over. I was wrong. The motel owner's voice was grim. "You can't just drive away. The road won't take you anywhere. Not anymore." I didn't want to believe him, but deep down, I already knew he was right. I looked back at the highway, the same endless stretch of darkness. No signs, no exits, no other cars. Like I was trapped in a loop. I let out a shaky breath. What do I do? His expression was unreadable. "Come inside." I stared at the motel, the same building I had just run from, the same place where I had seen it. Every instinct screamed at me to drive, to get out of here. But there was nowhere to go. I shut off the engine, grabbed my phone. Then, slowly, I opened the car door. The night air was thick, heavy with something I couldn't name. The motel owner stepped back, giving me space. He didn't say any, just nodded toward the entrance. I took a deep breath and walked toward the door. Inside, the motel looked exactly the same. Dim lights, stained carpet, that strange, suffocating stillness. Like the air itself was holding its breath. I followed the motel owner to the front desk. He moved quickly, like he had done this before. He reached behind the counter and pulled out something small, another bell. It looked identical to the one he had used earlier. He handed it to me. "Keep this with you," he said. I hesitated before taking it. The metal was cold against my palm. "What is this?" "It'll keep it away." My fingers tightened around the bell. I wanted to ask a million questions, but before I could, something changed. The air in the room shifted. The temperature dropped. I turned. The hallway was gone. Or rather, it had changed. The walls stretched longer than before. The lighting was dimmer, the shadows deeper. The doors all looked the same, dark wood, brass numbers. But there was something wrong about them. Something off. And at the far end of the hallway, a door was open. Pitch black inside. My stomach twisted. I knew something was in there. Watching. Waiting. The motel owner's voice was low. "It's here." I swallowed hard. What do I do? He met my gaze, his expression unreadable. "You have to face it." My throat went dry. "Face what?" He didn't answer. Instead, he pointed. At the open door. A chill ran down my spine. I didn't want to go in there, but I had no choice. This thing, whatever it was, wasn't going to let me leave, not unless I ended it. I took a deep breath, clutching the bell tight. Then, slowly, I stepped forward, toward the darkness, and whatever was waiting inside. I stopped just outside the open door. The air felt thick, pressing against my skin like something alive. Cold seeped into my bones. The hallway behind me was deathly silent. The motel owner hadn't followed. This was my fight. I gripped the small bell in my hand. My pulse pounded in my ears. Then I stepped inside. Total darkness. I couldn't see my own hand in front of my face. The room swallowed me whole, trapping me in an endless void. I felt it before I saw it. Something watching. Waiting. A slow, crawling dread crept up my spine. My breath came out shaky. I took another step forward. The floor beneath me wasn't carpet anymore. It was cold, hard, almost like stone. Something moved. I heard it before I saw it, a slow, dragging sound, like skin sliding against the floor. Then, A whisper. Soft. Familiar. My own voice. "Why did you come back?" I froze. The voice sounded exactly like me. I squinted into the dark, my fingers tightening around the bell. A shape began to form. At first, it looked like a shadow, shifting and stretching. Thinner figure. My breath hitched. It was me. Or rather something pretending to be me. It stood a few feet away, watching me with hollow black eyes. Its face was an exact copy of mine, every feature identical. But there was something wrong. Its mouth was too wide, its movements too unnatural. I stepped back. It stepped forward. The voice came again, my voice. "You shouldn't have come back." My stomach twisted. I raised the bell instinctively. The metal was ice cold in my palm. The thing smiled. A long, unnatural grin that stretched across its face. Then it lunged. I didn't think. I just reacted. I rang the bell. The sound sliced through the darkness like a blade. Sharp, piercing. The thing screamed. Not a normal scream, something inhuman. A horrible, distorted wail that made my ears ring. It recoiled. Its body twisted unnaturally. Limbs bending the wrong way. The shadows around it rippled like water. I rang the bell again. The sound echoed, vibrating in my bones. The thing clutched its head, its body glitching. The darkness around us shifted. For a split second, I saw everything. The motel wasn't a motel. It was something else. Something old. The rooms stretched endlessly, looping in on themselves. The hallways led to nowhere. The doors opened into nothing. And this thing, this copy of me, wasn't the only one. There were more. Trapped here. Waiting. I rang the bell one last time. The air tore apart. The thing let out one final, gut-wrenching screech, then collapsed. It didn't die. It simply folded, like a shadow melting into the floor. Then it was gone. The darkness lifted. Light returned. I blinked, adjusting to the sudden brightness. I was back, standing in the motel hallway. The carpet was old and stained, the lights dim but steady. The door behind me was gone, like it had never existed. I turned. The motel owner stood at the front desk, watching me. His face was unreadable. "It let you go," he said. My throat was dry. I swallowed. What was that thing?" He exhaled slowly. "This place isn't like other places." That wasn't an answer, but I could tell he wasn't going to give me one. I looked at the bell in my hand. It was warm now. The motel owner nodded toward the entrance. "You should leave." I didn't argue. I walked to the front door, my legs shaky. Pushed it open. Stepped outside. The night air was fresh. Cool. My car was right where I left it. The highway was normal. A few distant headlights in the distance. Signs pointing to exits. Like nothing had ever happened. I turned back. The motel was still there. Silent. Dark. But something was different. The neon sign, it didn't say vacancy anymore. The letters had changed. Closed. A chill ran through me. I got into my car, started the engine, and drove. This time, the road didn't loop. I drove until the motel was far, far behind me. And I never looked back. Final thoughts. I don't know what happened that night. I don't know if that thing was real, or if I was just losing my mind. But one thing is certain. That motel wasn't normal. And something inside it wanted me to stay. I was lucky to get out. Not everyone does. So if you ever see a roadside motel in the middle of nowhere, keep driving. No matter what.